Hello, I'm Patrick Watson, I'm an astrologer, and you're watching the Big Fat Astro Vlog Holiday Special. The Sun is now in tropical Sagittarius, a time of the year ruled by Jupiter, the planet of jollity and excess, and like Jupiter, it's in this time of year you often see another gift-dispensing jolly red giant everywhere you go. The Sun is in Sagittarius right as the holiday season goes in full swing. A time of conspicuous spending and gift-giving, a time we indulge in the consumption of rich foods and fellowship and family, a time when people literally get trampled to death trying to get a good deal on a flat-screen TV, a time of awkward Secret Santa gift exchanges at your work's holiday parties, and a time when right-wingers bust a nut over the imaginary persecution of Christmas. In short, a very Jupiter-like time of peace and goodwill to all. But Christmas hasn't always been this way. We could go back to how Christians co-opted several of the traditions of the Roman Saturnalia holiday, and how some traditional celebrations of Christmas involved getting drunk and punching people in the face if they didn't give you any alcohol, but when it comes to the more modern concept of Christmas as a family-friendly holiday, we only need to look back to Victorian times. And really, the man most responsible for our modern concept of Christmas today is actually Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens, of course, wrote A Christmas Carol, a timeless tale of a greedy old fuck who trips balls and sees ghosts who show him how he wasted his youth in the past, how people hate him in the present, and how they'll be glad he's dead in the future. He loses his shit and he decides to be fucking decent for once in his life on Christmas Day. And it's actually from this work that we get the phrase Merry Christmas. This is when this became a popular saying. And it's also from this work that we got a nightmarish mo-capped performance from Jim Carrey as Scrooge.
Well, howdy. I'm Duke, the astrologist elf of Christmas past.
Really?
Yeah.
An astrologist?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it just sounds a bit tacky. You're supposed to say astrologer if you have knowledge of astrology. This makes it sound like you don't really know what you're talking about. What, am I dreaming? Like, what's in this eggnog?
Rehypno.
Yeah, that's not really amusing at all, actually. People are paying me on Patreon for some of these videos. We can't have puppet astrologist, Christmas elves of Christmas past.
Well, you got your hand up your own ass.
I can't believe this is real. This can't be real.
Well, it's about as real as the Mars effect.
Well, I guess that's real enough for me. What do you want with me? Why are you visiting me?
Well, I'm the astrologist elf of Christmas past, so we're gonna crack open an ephemeris and look up some shit.
You know, I really could just use the computer. You didn't have to open a book.
Yes, you do have to fucking open a book. Yeah, I can't do everything on the computer. You're a panicking in my ass.
You know what? No, actually. We are in the 21st century, and I will use as much technology as possible to do the simplest of tasks. I will use all the technology, okay?
Fine.
Luddite.
Santa's ballsack.
I'll spank my bottom and call me Sally. That's Charles Dickens' chart.
How did I get on the other side of the screen?
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. He was born with Virgo rising, so his ascendant is ruled by Mercury, and that's already interesting since we know he's a writer, and that's definitely the domain of Mercury, the planet of communication and language. He is Mercury in Capricorn in the 5th, with Saturn, its ruler, in there too. And you know what's really interesting about that is that a common theme of his work is about the devastation of poverty and social stratification, social hierarchies. I mean, one of his books is even called Hard Times. That's pretty Saturn-y and Mercury and Capricorn-y.
No shit, Sherlock.
And Mercury is in the 5th house, which relates to children. And that's kind of interesting because that's another running theme in his books, children in poverty. For example, Oliver Twist. That was the first English novel to depict a child as the protagonist. And with Mercury being in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn in Capricorn in the 5th, it was about a child born into grueling poverty, bitter despair, and
a big pile of shit.
Yeah, a big pile of shit.
Yeah.
That's correct. Well,
Well, what else can you see?
Well, he was born at night, so that makes his moon the dominant light, and it's in the fourth, conjunct Neptune in Sagittarius. And I think there's two ways you can look at this. On the one hand, there's the meaning for himself personally, which is that this relates to his private life and maybe his mother, his parents. But there is the other broader interpretation of the fourth as relating not just to one's home, but also to one's homeland, their country. And with the moon conjunct a generational planet like Neptune, he's sort of personally picked up a more generational pattern of Neptune in Sagittarius. And, the Christmas season is definitely associated with Sagittarius, since that's when the sun is there. So maybe this is saying something about his outsized impact on the celebration of Christmas among his people in his homeland. And more generally, he's had an enduring influence as kind of this icon in Sagittarian realms of literature. He's still studied in universities. His works are still loved by millions and, adapted into movies and TV shows.
So what was going on when he published A Christmas Carol?
That's actually not a bad question. That's kind of interesting. So let's take a look at that. So he published A Christmas Carol on December 19th, 1843, and he wrote it in about 6 weeks. And he finished it, they say, in the early days of December. So that would mean that he started maybe like mid-October. So I don't think it's kind of interesting taking a look at these transits over the course of those 6 weeks is, number one, I noticed that, he experienced a Saturn conjunction to his Mercury in that time. You can see, getting into late October, definitely in November, Saturn is hitting his Mercury. And I think what's interesting about that too is that his natal Mercury is in Capricorn. So his Mercury receiving a conjunction from Saturn, its ruler, is essentially a really significant kind of transit. And it's it's kind of funny because, what was he writing about? Think about the main character of A Christmas Carol. It's Ebenezer Scrooge, so he's this greedy old miser, I think it's a very perfectly Saturnian character. I mean, even the word Scrooge just sounds so cruel and mean. And, the word Scrooge is now used, independently of its context. It just means someone who is kind of a grouchy old person. And, and he says, bah humbug, he's a perfectly Saturnian, archetypal character, such a Saturn type character. And so I guess it's sort of funny, like, one would come up with Ebenezer Scrooge under a Saturn transit to your Mercury in Capricorn. And the other really huge transit that was happening at the same time, which I think is in some ways is reflective of the point of the story and of Scrooge's transformation from miser to, kind of gentler, more compassionate, generous man, is, not only did he experience a Neptune conjunction to his sun in Aquarius in this time, but he also experienced a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction to his sun. And this is a very rare transit. I mean,
Keep that shit out, Holmes.
To receive a Neptune conjunction to your sun, that's a once-in-a-lifetime transit. So to receive a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction to your sun is, just that much more unusual to get in your lifetime. You may only certain sections of the zodiac, will get that within regular lifespans. So I think, it's important to consider, his motivations in writing, this book. And it's a very Jupiter Neptune type thing. I mean, he basically was capitalizing on, this zeitgeist of the revival of Christmas traditions in the mid-Victorian era, sort of connecting this generosity of spirit in the Christmas season to the alleviation of society's ills and the scourge of poverty, kind of rebooting Christmas for the modern era, making it this festive season and global commercial bonanza that it's become. So, and you even have to understand the public's reaction to this book when it was published was pretty insane. The story actually inspired bosses to give their employees turkeys for Christmas and stuff. Like, it was some real Jupiter Neptune type shit. Like, it's very idealistic, very optimistic. One of the book reviewers said, like, this is a guy who reviewed it in the time it came out, said this is a personal kindness to everyone who reads it. This is when, so the modern Christmas spirit, really kind of comes into the picture. So I kind of see this whole thing as kind of a combination of his natal moon conjunct Neptune in Sagittarius, as well as, transiting Jupiter and Neptune in Aquarius conjunct his natal sun.
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
Sometimes it's hard to top what the astrological symbolism says so clearly just by itself. And what's even weirder is that one of the last high-profile adaptations of A Christmas Carol was that ghoulish 3D computer-animated motion capture monstrosity starring Jim Carrey, which was released on November 3rd, 2009.
But that's when...
Yes. On November 3rd, 2009, Jupiter was conjunct Neptune in Aquarius again, just like when the book of A Christmas Carol was first published. It was essentially the Neptune return of when A Christmas Carol was published. And Neptune is illusions and fantasy and has this association with movies, which are essentially illusions. And so, yeah, the Neptune return of A Christmas Carol was a 3D CGI mocap Neptune dream / nightmare. That whole Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Aquarius in 2009 was all about 3D and movies and stuff like that. Mocap. Remember Avatar?
Yeah, it's in my spank bank.
Yeah, basically that.
Well, I drank a gallon of peppermint mocha, so I got a crap.
Okay,
so I had the Astrologist elf of Christmas past. So what, does this mean I get the Astrologist elf of Christmas present or something? I see what's happening here. I also anticipate that you will be about as useless as the last one.
Yep.
Great. Well, right now, let's see, what's happening in the present is, Saturn's coming to the end of its stay in Sagittarius, and honestly, if it could just stay away from Sagittarius for a long time, that'd be great, because, I kind of had my Saturn return last year, and I'm kind of done with it.
Well, you got about 29 years.
Sweet.
So, what are you feeling right now?
Well, I'm looking forward to the new Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi. It looks really, really cool.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm working on this video right now.
Yeah, I'm in it too.
The weather's good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I think this isn't really working out.
I need a crap.
Okay. So let me guess. I'm gonna get an astrologist elf from the Christmas that is yet to come. What? You just gonna point? Okay, pointing. What are you pointing at? Are you gonna tell me the future? It goes to Christmas future. The elf, the astrologist, Christmas elf. Okay, you're gonna have to talk. If you're just gonna point, what are you pointing at? An ephemeris. December 19th, 2017. Saturn enters Capricorn for the next 2.5 years. That's right at the entrance of the Sun into Capricorn as well. So the Sun and Saturn are going to be entering Capricorn on basically the same day in 2017. Huh. So what does that mean? Are you saying it's going to be a pretty bleak Christmas? I can't tell if I'm talking to the ghost of Christmas future or Lassie the dog. Give me something here. Okay, so there's something especially Saturnian about this Christmas. Basically, Scrooge comes to town, but he doesn't transform into a kinder person on Christmas Day. Although, while Scrooge could be a hard boss, I mean, Mr. Cratchit still worked hard for him, and he did get paid, just had to work really hard. I mean, the Saturn transit is not going to be easy, but I guess if we put our heads down and just really, work at it, it should be alright, right? So, what is Saturn in Capricorn about? Tell me! Tell me! What the heck? So, what is Saturn in Capricorn about?
May I be of service?
God.
Why don't you take a look at Charles Dickens' chart again?
I could look back in Charles Dickens' chart because he has Saturn in Capricorn. That's interesting. That's interesting because in my video lecture, Sunshine, Rainbows, and Daisies, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, 2018 through 2020, which is available on my site for $15, and there will be a link available in the description for you to buy, and you should buy it right now, buy.
Now that's a
is, Saturn in Capricorn tends to be coincident with times when notorious prisons are built. And of course, this kind of goes hand in hand with what we know about Saturn and Capricorn, which is that they're limiting principles. And Capricorn is, a place where Saturn is kind of at home, and Saturn's kind of about lonely, cold, hard, dark places. And I don't think there's anywhere, more cold, dark, and hard than, a prison.
Or your mom's
And
vagina.
so what's interesting about that is, prisons have really featured in Charles Dickens' life in very important ways. One of the reasons why he writes about poverty so much in his books is when he was 12, his father was sent to debtor's prison. And in the Victorian ages, families were basically in prison with them. Now, they weren't always locked up. I mean, he was able to leave, but at 12 years old, Charles Dickens had to work in a boot factory where the conditions were very, very harsh, and he had to do that to support his family. The experience that Charles Dickens had of going through that was such a big deal for him because he had come from relative wealth before that point, and that was his first real taste of like what other people had to go through on a more kind of daily basis. So I think it's interesting that it was a prison that had such a tremendous impact on the young Charles Dickens and sort of colored the kind of subjects that his books would explore. At his Saturn return, Charles Dickens made a trip to the United States. He made a particular point to visit hospitals and jails and insane asylums in America. He was very interested in seeing these places, these very Saturnian, Capricornian places, these places where people are not free. And that was one of the biggest things that he criticized the United States for, was the institution of slavery. Because this was just before the Civil War was breaking out and everything. So, he was staunchly anti-slavery. Saturn and Capricorn can have this more mundane signification of the establishment of prisons and of places where people are kept away from the world, where people are kept out or people are kept in somewhere, and then the personal relevance that a place like that has had on this author. There'll be a time when there's kind of a cultural focus on the issues of poverty, crime, punishment, imprisonment, and debt. And this is on a societal level. Saturn's going to be co-present with Pluto, and Saturn and Capricorn will be kind of completing this Saturn-Pluto cycle surrounding human rights abuses, terrorism, and empowered national security state that will be caused by and will cause a general atmosphere of depression and fear. Yeah, so I think that's a little bit about what Saturn and Capricorn will be about, and it's going to be starting this Christmas. Well, at least we'll get to see the Saturn returns of Taylor Swift, Rihanna, all of the Harry Potter actors, so that's pretty cool. Thank you so much for watching the Big Fat Astro Vlog Holiday Special. I cherish your support on Patreon. Even if you're giving me a measly $1, I appreciate it. It keeps me going, keeps the lights on, keeps my big fat ass stro jiggling. Catch my next video by hitting subscribe, share this with your friends, give them a laugh, and let me know what you think in the comments. To everyone watching, happy holidays.
Whew, that was one big crap. Well, better be going on my way. Wait, is that mistletoe? Well, hello. Oh, well, hello. Come here. I want to do something special. Blow myself, baby, yeah.